Hi, everyone. Hello, good afternoon, good evening. Of course, for people joining online, and good morning, depending on where you're joining in from. My name is Kingsley Mpadiok, and Lilybell just got that pronunciation right. She's probably one of the few persons on planet Earth besides my family that can pronounce her name. So I give it to her. Please, can you just put your hands together for yourself for being here? Okay, so I'm a brand and product designer, and I pretty much just do a lot of things design related. And I think about like 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I found open source, and not just that I found open source, I've always heard about open source, and I've always wanted to be a part of it. I've always wanted to contribute to open source because I knew of some friends that were contributing to it and doing so well. And but somehow I didn't know how to get involved. Maybe I'm just gonna buy some time and see if we can get more persons joining. So I've always wanted to be a part, contribute, to be a part of amazing projects, and in the last 3 years, it's really been interesting. It's really been cool. So I'm hoping that by the end of this workshop, you should be able to learn a thing or two that you yourself should be able to start contributing to open source projects. Just easy. So open design is the practice of making design process and products publicly available to anyone to use, modify, and share. So I'm going to try to make these as conversational as possible, so that if you have questions, you probably can raise with just a few persons here. So if you have questions, you can just wave, and then and then we will also move ahead to probably share a thing or two on GitHub, right? So open design is the practice of making design process and products publicly available to anyone to use, modify, and share. So the key word here is maybe use, of course, modify, and share. So we all are designers, right? Let me see the designers here, please. If you're a designer, whoa. Okay, technical writer. Okay. Besides, okay, let me see designers again. Can you rate it very high? Let me know. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Only seven designers. Okay, can a few persons too. Can you just probably just tell me what you do and probably just go around? I want to know the people I'm talking to, so it will also help me maybe say things that will be useful. You please. You, yeah. Yeah. Oh, software tester, non-code. Well, this talk actually applies to both designers and non-technical open source contributors. So anything you do and you fall under the category of a non-technical open source contributor, this talk is definitely going to be relevant. So how about you? Yeah. Are you a designer? Non-designer. Titan. Titan. Okay, I think you just wait outside. I recognize that face. Okay, no problem. So I'll just consider every other person a non-technical, but even if you're a technical person here, you still find this relevant. So because some of the rules here sort of like applies. So open design is the practice of making design processes and products publicly available. So when you create something, there's this analogy I really love. Sometime I was involved in a project, and of course, I think one of the videos talked about like you prepared a meal, and then you have your recipe, and then you had a couple of friends around who probably love the meal, and now maybe requested for the recipe and stuff, and oh, I would love to make this, and you now decide to share the recipe with your friends, right? And then your friend can now leave and probably a mutual friend share to a friend of a friend and all that. So so your recipe now, it's in a way open sourced. So others can use. So the idea of modifying it now is maybe whatever you prepared, you love yours to be spicy, not everyone loves like spicy meal. So the other person might decide, okay, I don't want it too spicy and all that. So that's the modification part. And then sharing, right? So if my friend now wants to share with maybe a friend of his, right? Or like, oh, Kingsley, someone else is asking for this cake recipe. Should I share? Is it like a personal stuff? I like, tell the person to send in some money before you share, So maybe when it comes to sharing, that's probably where you learn about licensing in open source and all that. And this is not really about licensing. So the core principles of open design. So first thing is transparency. Now, why I decided to even touch base on this is because as designers, right, it's not really in our DNA to be transparent with our processes, right? And if you're a designer and then a product designer and then you're on Figma working on your stuff and then you see your PM, spotlighting you on Figma, or you see the product owner spotlighting, please, can you just leave? I'll come back to this workspace when you're out of. So, we don't like that whole idea, but for developers, it's different for developers because from day one they learn how to collaborate, GitHub and the whole process. It's just, all inclusive. But that's one thing we lack as designers. So when we come over to open source is a place where you probably see like the same Figma. Now, maybe depending on how large that team is, you probably might be seeing like maybe even 100 persons in the same workspace, right? And everybody's just been moving things around, doing stuff. But at this point in time, it's just all about like all design files, discussions, and decisions are publicly accessible. So it has to be accessible to everyone. That's the whole idea. That's why it's open source, right? It has to be accessible. So we have collaboration, right? And then all design files, discussions, and decisions also are publicly accessible. Like on Figma, right? It also depends, like I said, on some of the code of conduct of the community you're contributing to, right? And is it open for everyone? Even within open source, you also have a close contribution where maybe some group of people, right? Maybe only group of people. Okay, for example, within Chaos, where I contribute to, I'm going to talk about Chaos much later in detail, but there are actually some projects oftentimes that are sort of like closed. So you just have a handful of persons, but as long as it's open for everyone to contribute to, you always the link is probably open. Anybody can access the file and also design. So sharing. Designs are licensed to be freely used, modified, and redistributed. So most of us too that also use Figma. I think I have some illustration assets I created, I think like 2 years ago or 3, I can't even recall. And I just there on Figma community. And I know a lot of persons have sort of like, duplicated that file, use it, probably create things I don't even know, right? So you see that whole idea of sharing, people like, duplicate what you've created and just share it. I have this 3D asset I created on Spline with Spline tool. I mean, there was no Spline. So I created this 3D asset on Spline. I just also drop it on the community. Maybe some person sometimes just get notification, but people duplicate, use it to create their stuff, right? So all these things sort of like applies to design. And then open design and traditional design. Most times when you talk to designers and contributing for about, I think, 3 years now, when you talk to designers, people always like, do I need GitHub or what's so different from open design and what I'm doing? And you don't really have, it's basically just the same thing, right? But then I'm just going to point out just 1 or 2 things in the course of this stuff. So open design, transparent process, knowledge is shared, focus on community, co-creation, iterative and evolving, always evolving. Traditional design, oftentimes you also associated with maybe proprietary softwares or products where, the entire this thing is locked, it's closed. So intellectual property is locked. Focus on a single entity creator or company or institution. So if you're working with if you work with Microsoft, right? Is Microsoft open source? No, I'm not sure. It's not open source. So if you work with any other proprietary firms out there, right? You don't expect them to be putting their stuff out in the open. By the way, I think recently Contra is one of these freelance platforms where creatives, can get jobs, something similar to Upwork. They made their, I think, design style guide public. So you find a lot of persons, duplicating it and recreating stuff. So an amazing work they did there. So, of course, you now see traditional design, which is what a lot of persons here are used to. You're working with a company and stuff. I don't expect you to come to DevFest and share your design file with me. That probably bridging the company's contracts and all that. So, how to make design contribution? So, we'll probably jump in now and start talking about some practical aspects. So, how do you make design contribution? Having known what open source design is, right? Do you all know what open source design is? Can I hear a sounding yes? Okay, I'm convinced right now. So how do you make design? First is that you find a project if you want to contribute. So I'm just gonna run through this and then we'll just take it one after the other. So you find a project, and the next thing is you learn where designers can make an impact in the project, right? And then you execute tasks. And then, of course, tax documentation, right? So first is finding a project. So now I'm just going to pick GitHub, right? But then you can find open source projects just like anywhere. For example, I just told you I contribute to GitHub Chaos, right? I'm like, okay, Kingsley, how can I contribute to Chaos, right? That's just probably one way. I also contribute to Bitcoin design ecosystem. I'm like, oh, Kingsley, how can I start contributing, right? I've probably also joined, but not actively, on Ethereum to Ethereum Foundation, where I probably do some, design contributions too. So I'm also going to share, I don't know how you all will get the link. I should have created a QR code for that, but sorry. I think I have a link here that has over 500 projects, open source project that needs design help. So there are a lot of projects out there you can always, check out. So but first we're going to take GitHub, because GitHub has like, I think, millions of projects. And maybe in the course of this too, I'm also going to talk about like a tool I was working on, I think sometime early this year with some friends, that can also help you find some projects sometimes. Okay, so one of the first things you do is, how many of us here do you have GitHub? Okay, we have our PCs, right? You have your laptop with you. If you are with your laptop, let me see your hands. This was, of course, a workshop. Um, so how many persons here with their PC? So I was hoping this was going to be effectively communicated, because for you to kind of like follow along, you need. But okay, you probably can just tag along with someone beside you. And maybe if you have GitHub app too, I think you can also experiment. So if you have, do you have GitHub accounts? Okay, we all have. Amazing. That's nice. Okay, so if you have an account, so just look for the search bar on GitHub, like the GitHub interface. So the search bar, you can just search, just type for, what is it again? Chaos. That's CHAOSS. So I want to demo this also, like using the community where I contribute to. Oh, someone is just booting. I can hear the mark sound right now. Someone is just booting. It's okay. So what you do first is, I'm just going to spend some time so you do that, because I really want us to move along, right? And even if you're not able to move along with us, I have everything documented in an article I wrote, I think, 2 years ago, about contributing to open source using GitHub as a designer, right? I have a documentation on that. I think maybe I'll share that, or you can just head over to Medium and search for Kingsley Mpadiok. You'll find it. So who is on this page now? Like, if you're on GitHub and you've gotten to this point, like type chaos in your search bar and then and just hit search. So you should see this. So even if it's 1 or 2%, okay, you're on this page right now. So you can see some of this. Okay, so now when you go to, what you just notice, right, is when you search, of course, GitHub gives you a couple of filter, right? So you have code, you have repository, you have issues, you have pull requests, I think for now, we're just going to focus on two things, repositories and issues. Repositories is just more like you just have like a folder of projects you have inside, like, if you're a designer, you've created a folder. Like, okay, I have on my PC, I have a folder named project, and inside that project folder, I have every client's project I've worked on. So it's kind of like a folder inside the folder, right? So, and these are all like different clients. So, repository, you find chaos is a project, and inside chaos repository, you find different chaos like sub project and stuff. So, I'm gonna move on to the next one. Give me a sec. Okay. So, so the next thing you pick is just go to, because there's a particular project I want us to check. So you scroll down to the bottom, you should see the pagination, and you can go to page 2. Page 2. On page 2, you'll find this Chaos Africa. If you can see that, just let me know, please. Okay, you can find it. Okay, amazing. Thank you. Village people decided to avoid me. Okay, it's really cool. So Chaos Africa is just a chapter of Chaos, and I really want to use it to demo what I'm going to talk about. So if you click on that, it's going to take you to the Chaos Africa like project page, where you find a couple like folders. You find a couple of folders, and then you have one particular folder, or file you always have to look out for. Now, what I'm sharing with you now applies to, for example, I just talked about Bitcoin design. I talked about Ethereum. I talked about, I mentioned a couple of projects. So if you now want to okay, let me just check out this project. If you're convinced and you know that this project is an open source project, all you just need to do is just head over to GitHub, right? Search for the project repository. So when you now check, now when you go to their page on GitHub, one of the very first things you have to do, even if you are maybe an employee in the company, one of the things you always have to look out for is the read.md file. All right. So why that is important is because it allows you read about the project, or maybe you're just randomly just going through GitHub and learning about some projects. So if you click on, I think I missed that. That should have actually come after this. Maybe I will probably share a screen that has that. So the read.md file talks about the project, right? Where you learn about the project, what the project is about, and what the project does. And of course, if it's an open source project, the read.md file is also where you also learn about the project. Sometimes, maybe some people even also include their code of conduct there, right? And then you probably also know how to contribute to it, all right? So let me check. Coming. Okay, so you notice that we have issues, right? We have pull requests, we have discussions. I'm just doing this because if I'm being honest with you, as a designer, on your day-to-day, you may not necessarily need GitHub. Okay, the company where I work with, 99% of my job doesn't take me to GitHub, right? So, but then I think it's also a tool you should learn, especially if you also want to contribute. I started using more of GitHub when I started contributing to open source, right? So that's how we're kind of like doing this. So you navigate to, if you're on this page with me, can you see this page? Can you all see this page? For those of us on this thing, can you see this page, this particular page now? Okay, just click on the issues tab. Click on the issues tab. I just wanted to show both screens, so then, but I'm just gonna demo this live with my PC, so we also say so. So the issues now, these are actually some old issues, but I think I'll probably create one here and see who can also contribute to it. So, so the issues tab is where you find like different issues, like issues, design tags, right? Things you can contribute to. So this is also where any project at all you want to contribute to, this is where you always find a project. So issues. So most times they create and sometimes they add labels to them. Okay, so we had to go over to the second page, right? The second page where you find Chaos Africa, right? So you click on Chaos Africa. And then Chaos Africa, you see the read.md file I talked about. Usually, I think it's one of the files that is just open here when you go through. So, Chaos Africa, this is a community aims to empower people to become integrated into the Chaos project and contribute meaningfully, blah, 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 how it works, a lot of focus group, and how to contribute. So this just gives you a clue of what you find when you visit project pages, right? So like this just describe a project so you know how to contribute. And oftentimes when you can proceed to join Slack conversations and all that. But then let's just go to the issues because this is really about how you can contribute. And I have limited time left. So you see stuff like labels, right? You see design labels. These are also things you look out for when you want to contribute, right? So if that's how you know that, okay, it's a design contribution, right? Let me see if we have something here. Okay, let me check. No issue. This was ChaosCon event that happened. I think I don't know if I'm allowed to share some of this, but okay. So, so this just to sort of like share with you. Now, one thing you need to understand is that what's your primary responsibility as a designer? What developers do in open source is different from what you do as a designer. But I think most designers usually feel, oh, maybe a developer is writing code. Maybe when I come into open source, I have to write code. I agree that the whole concept of open source is built on a more technical inclined term because open source is kind of like the source code is open, putting your source code, you know. But then if you look at it from a generalistic perspective, like the source, when you just open, even you make your port open source. Your siblings, your friends can just eat from it. So your design file, right? So when you come, if you're a brand designer, because some persons ask, oh, I'm a graphic designer, how can I contribute? Can a graphic designer? Yes, you can contribute. You're an illustrator, you can contribute. You are, if you want to call yourself a flyer designer, if you're a flyer designer, you can contribute. So I'm just showing this because we had the event, and then this was like Chaos Africa 25 event experience design. All right, so a lot of conversations around maybe I think just general experience of the event. Now, Ethereum has Ethereum DevCon and all that. Being part of the Discord, I've seen a lot of conversations around, also contributing to the event and all that. So it's not always really about the project, right? Another beautiful thing you need to understand is that open source is also about the community, right? Connecting and relating with people. So just assume that this is the part I hate so much using our word assume. But let's just say I wanted to create, maybe I just create as a project a design maintainer, which I am. So I'm allowed to create an issue. Okay, we have. I'm gonna share. Let me see if I can pull that up. So by the way, okay. So maybe before we go to that, I'm also going to point us to. Let me just take us to a Chaos workspace on Figma. This particular workspace. I'm just going to share. Maybe just provide this will also help us to understand what I'm talking about. Can you all actually see the screen? Because I don't know if. Okay, so actually looked pixelated at some point. Okay, so now this is actually, remember when I said Chaos is an open source project, and inside Chaos you have other sub projects. So one of those projects is Augur. So Augur is a data engineering tool that gathers open source software community data to synthesize them to provide project health metrics. So this was actually one of the design projects we worked on, all right, in Chaos, all right, and I just want to share. So now, I talked about going to GitHub and checking out some projects. In fact, for contributing for like 3 years now, I also realized that a lot of projects also have their design documentation hosted in different places, right? By that I mean you can actually also find your design documentation on Figma. For those that use Figma, the Penport design tool, and maybe a couple of other design tools. So you now see that this is well documented, and the documentation part of this design too is also done by designers like you and I, right? So when maybe if I share this file with you, because I can actually share this with you, this is an open source project, so I can share with you, you can just go through and familiarize yourself. And then when you go through, you read about more about this thing, the design notes. And so now, if you now really want to get your hands dirty, so this is beginning to look familiar now, right? So that's why I said that if you're a product designer, right, this looks super familiar because if you want to, these are the basic foundations, right? To designing a product, you have to, first of all, define your typefaces, right? For those of us that love Inter, and then you have colors, and then, of course, move along with variables. Some designers are smiling. So you move along creating variables and all that, the design styles. So now, one thing you need to understand is that this is a community, right? You don't have to work on the project end to end. You don't have to be the only one working on everything. So you could just be the person working on the font styles, the typography. You can be the person working on the color styles, setting this up. I'm going to show us other components because I can't design live here right now. So I'm just trying to work. So usually after going through GitHub and then you discover an issue, right? That's why I moved from GitHub to Figma. When you discover an issue on GitHub, oftentimes you always see the link to the project where you can contribute. And if you didn't find the link, you saw on the README app, all the projects I've interacted with on GitHub, I noticed they usually add maybe be Slack or Discord or any channel of communication, I'm begging, always try to sort of like join those channels, right? Because if you don't find all the details you need on GitHub, you always find it in those channels. So from there, you probably will see the Figma link, right? And I'm also going to come maybe for those that maybe you're not a Figma person, you use Photoshop, Illustrator, and other tools like I do. So let's see this. Okay, I'm going to move to the main design proper. Oh my, I think, okay. Okay, so Augur project, one of the things we tried doing for Augur project was to optimize the experience for the Augur project. I wish I could share to us what it looks like. Now, in simple terms, what Augur does is if you're part of an open source project and you want to learn more about how maybe developers contribute to your project and how people are contributing to your project. Augur is one of those tools that helps you give a breakdown. Augur is that tool that gives a breakdown of the data, right? Maybe how many persons joined your XYZ project last month, how many, PRs were made on GitHub, how the people contribute. So that's one thing. That's what Ogo does in simple terms. So there's a lot around data, data visualization, right? So if like you zoom in, you see a lot of this work that's been done, component that's been created. These are different charts that help represent that. For example, you see repo general information, you see license, code of conduct, number of releases, issues enabled, like data, languages that different contributors use, maybe as developers, and maybe you probably also find design somewhere. And you see a lot of like data. So this is all like open source. This was done by designers like you and I, right? And then for the non-designers that are also here, so if you're maybe a technical writer or you are a product or project manager, right? You can also come in and interface with, because when this is being designed, it's just follow the same proprietary software development process where maybe you design and then you interface with developers to now bring the design to life, right? So the PM can also come in and interact. What's pending, what's ongoing. So the only thing with uh, open source is it's not a sprint. It's usually a marathon. So everyone just sort of like just take their time and just do stuff. So why I'm sharing this is to say that um so you don't need GitHub. You're not designing on GitHub. So what you need GitHub for is to find the project and find the issues. And by the time you find the project or the issues, you can head over to Slack and establish a communication, just a relationship rather. And maybe you can ask questions, right? And if you didn't find an issue on GitHub, you probably like, okay, you can head over to Slack, like introduce yourself. I am Kingsley. I am a brand designer, and I would really love to contribute to this project, right? Are there any open design tags that I can contribute to? That's one way to contribute. Another way is when you're able to discover, which I think I usually prioritize this over the first one, where I take out time, just study, just take a look at the product. If it's a product-driven community, I take a look at the product. For example, something like Ogo, the website was terrible before now. The experience was terrible. And then I was like, okay, we can do something about the UX. Even there's another project too, the badge initiative by Chaos too. It's also one of the initiative I pushed when I joined. Like optimizing the experience was an initiative I pushed because like before I joined, everything was like entirely on like GitHub, I don't want to go into details of that, but the focus was how do we optimize the user experience? Because as a designer, your responsibility is to solve problems, right? You're a creative problem solver. And in all honesty, I feel like most of that problem solving happens maybe off the design tool. Because I feel if you are not able to solve the problem before you even head into the design tool, then you are going to design chaos, right? So you have to. It happens a lot. Sometimes you just process a whole lot off your design tool, and when you head over, it's just to execute, right? When you discover the issue to contribute to, you now head over to be it okay. If you're a graphic person, you can head over to Photoshop. You can head over to Illustrator. I've had to. This is the flow. Whenever you're using a tool outside Figma. Why I love Figma most of the time is because anybody, you can add up anybody, right? The collaborative feature of Figma allows anyone to join on and work. Hello, are we still together? Is everyone following me? Is this boring? Do you guys want me to tell a story? Story. Oh, but we are all here, right? You're all with me. Feel free to sort of like connect with me after now, and if probably you need extra help, right? And then I did mention my article. I'm just mentioning that so. Just in case I'm just sharing a whole lot and you feel a bit overwhelmed, let me share this file. I don't care what happened, but this was, I'm going to come to this. just moving to, I shared something around product design. I want to share something about around graphics, right? I do graphic design. I'm more like I do everything. Okay, these will look familiar because for how many persons attended Oscar? Okay, so I contribute to Oscar too, and amazing team of designers we have, and I also contributed to it as a designer. So the tool we use is Figma. We use Figma, right? Like I feel 99% was done on Figma. Only 1% was done on Illustrator, the merge, that merge you're seeing. The wormhole merge was done on Illustrator rather, and then exported to Figma. Because I had to export it from Illustrator to Figma because other people needed to use that assets for other design components. So I'm sharing this to tell you that if you're a flyer designer, a brand designer, you can contribute to open source projects, right, with your skill. So one of the things you should take when working out this door is that I don't care what your design skill is, you can contribute. In fact, anybody can contribute to open source. Anybody, just anybody can contribute to open source, right? As long as you see value and you're coming to solve a problem and because open source is just really about building better product. Everything tech as it is today is built on open source. We all have Android phones now. Oh, I know. iOS guys on the other angle probably like, but technology as it is today is largely open source. Even some of the proprietary softwares or products also have an open source aspect of it, right? That is open to the public. And if you are maybe you're 10 years in design, I don't care, or you're just starting out, it's also one of the best places you can also build your design, this thing. So this session is not about me designing, but it's about showing you first how to discover a project and then how to go ahead to design, right? And another thing I also want to mention is because I've worked with a lot of designers in Chaos and I've also contributed to GoofStack. Funny thing is that GoofStack project, I didn't really do design. When I first joined, they had an issue around UX, right? They needed a better display of information flow and all that. It was the UX thing I wanted to do. I didn't do anything design related, graphics, visual stuff. So, what you do in communities varies, and you don't have to box yourself as a designer. Designers are multi-talented individuals, and you shouldn't box yourself inside that or Photoshop, Figma, Illustrator, Canva, or whatever you use, because I see a lot of those debates online. Now, first, as a designer, you have to see yourself as a creative problem solver. So you solve but well, I pride myself in the fact that people actually reach out to me and I share amazing ideas with them, or maybe provide solutions to maybe building startup, or okay, Kingsley, what do you think, or what do you feel? So because that's what you are as a designer, like you see things people don't see. Is it amazing? A client just meets you and tell you, oh, this is what I want. And then the next thing is that you brought everything to life. Like, that's crazy. Sometimes I think about it, I think this is crazy. So in fact, we should declare public holiday for designers. World Designers Day. I don't know if we have that. So let me see if I can go back to the slide. Okay, so when you find an issue, I talked about finding an issue, and then you can go ahead to ask questions. How do I contribute? How do I be of help to this project? And then you can now decide to move from any tool, go use any tool you want. And oftentimes when you use those tools, if it's a flyer you worked on, you can export it to a Google Drive and then upload it on the drive and then share the link. If there are assets you created, like I mentioned the Oscar flyer, right? That I created some assets outside Figma. If I know these assets are going to be reusable, because I use Illustrator to create that asset, and it's two things I can do. I can save the Illustrator file, right, and upload it on the drive, or I can move that particular asset I created as a vector to Figma so that people can reuse it, right? So here's the link I talked about. So if you can copy it from, I think while looking up for this talk, I found like 500 projects. Some may not necessarily still be active, but I'm pretty sure you find a lot, like 500 projects that needs design help. So you find like tons of amazing projects. Just go through them. If you don't find if you don't find one helpful, just move on to to another one, right? So, but I have to emphasize the fact that I've spoken with some top maintainers in open source projects, and the problem they always seem to have is when designers join, always coming to, oh, what can I do? It's a valid question to ask, but I also have to say this, that when you join projects, you can also take out time to just understand the project, because you can't contribute to what you don't understand, right? And if you're not a fan of Web3, then you should avoid Web3 open source projects, right? If you find the whole idea of blockchain complex, avoid it, but it's also another way for you to learn, depending on how you approach it too, because that's also why I love open source, right? So let's say you are, okay, early this year, I just started experimenting with illustrations, like working illustrations and all that. And guess what? One of the first projects I contributed to as an illustrator was the GitHub open source project I was involved in. And seriously, if that was like maybe I was pushing myself as an illustrator outside, maybe no one wants to hire me because I was just a beginner illustrator, although I had like design skills. But somehow eventually that was paid, by the way. So, but then I'm saying this, that even when you want to, maybe UI product designer or a brand designer, you want to explore that aspect of design, and you also want to exploit within people have skills. I'm like, okay, where do I put these skills to use, or where do I start experimenting? You can come do that in open source, right? And put those skills to use. We also have a branding project going on Chaos for those. I think I've showed this already. For those of us that are brand designers, so we are working on a comprehensive brand design project for Chaos community. So if you are a brand designer here and you want to contribute, you can meet me after this talk and probably just get you onboarded. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier, right? Visual design, UX optimization, design process documentation, amazing work too in Bitcoin design. I feel more designers here in Africa should also join projects like that. Bitcoin design, Ethereum Foundation, people just go on X, and I feel it's much productive if I get the whole idea of sharing your work on X. I try to do sometimes, though I still struggle with imposter syndrome even after 5 years in design. It's crazy. So, but I feel more comfortable even doing stuff within the open source space. So beyond just sharing your stuff on X, you can also look for open source community. Imagine contributing to, there's this Ethereum Foundation documentation I was going through, I was reading, and at the end of the documentation, I saw a list of contributors. They spotlighted the contributors, and then we're just right here, and Ethereum is recognizing you as one of the contributors. Those are some of the perks you get from, being a part of, global projects like this. Accessibility audits. I have a friend, probably she spoke one of these days, Toria. She does a whole lot around accessibility, right? Design system and brand. I just shared design system, brand style guide. Now, one of the contribution type in Ethereum Foundation repeatedly is usually around even testing, right? Usability testing. You test, and then if you find issues, oh, this thing is broken, just like you're in your company and then your company launch an app, you run speed tests, you run usability tests, you run A/B testing, right? If you guys had an older version, and all those things. So it's not far from, because these are projects, these are softwares that are being used by people out there, and they need the experience to be good, to be better. So you can also contribute as a usability tester yourself, or probably just conduct a UX research on it? No. So, we have 10 minutes to go. Probably to share one or two things, but I just want to like pause here and get some questions. If you have questions, okay, I have one. Please shoot.
As an experienced open source contributor, how do you determine which projects to contribute to?
Okay, thank you so much. That's pretty good. Honestly, that's going to be one of the first questions you always have to answer before even jumping on any project. But even if you don't have answer to that question, sometimes when you look at the project, just generally looking at what exactly do you think excites you as a designer, right? Partyfest, you guys just launched, right? And nice UI and stuff. So, are you an illustrator? Do you find artistic design like interesting? Then maybe something like Ethereum, because Ethereum they do a lot around illustrations. You find all that's cool. So of course, if you're kind of like a Web3 person, right? And are you a product designer? Are you more inclined to design systems? Like you find a lot of joy in building design systems, right? It means when you join a project, you have to look out for, or even if most times, this is also another interesting part. Most times when you join a project, this project most times don't have everything figured out. So you have to come in and create those things. Like I've created a lot of things since joining Chaos. I've created a lot of things that were not there and shaped the design culture there, and they became more design conscious. So if there's a system, a company, or a project you find, oh, maybe I feel like I could contribute to this project. Take, for example, maybe Ethereum now. And you come into Ethereum Foundation and then Ethereum doesn't have a design system. Like, what are you guys doing with a design system? And you start creating one. And then other people now see. So sometimes too, when you join projects, you may not really see your interest being spotlighted, but you can create that within the community because most of the maintainers don't even know they needed one. Another thing is that even when the need, probably there's no one there to actually do it. So that's why you are here. But most times, what I notice from experience is that most designers come in because we are used to, oh, there's a Jira board, there's a Trello board, spells out all the tags, and then you just find your tags. But most times it doesn't happen that way on GitHub or on open source, right? So you have to be the one to initiate it. I see another hand, but I'll still come back to you. Okay, she wants to.
Yeah, I wanted to like add to what he said, Kingsley.
Okay.
So like in addition to what he has already said, I think
Mine
one
is
of
the.
I think
Okay.
I think one of the cool ways I find like, contributing to projects is maybe if their values align with mine. For instance, there's a project called Shine, and they're into providing support for underrepresented women. So, like, because I enjoy projects like that, just literally supporting women, uplifting women, and just being there for them. So, but for them specifically, it's for women facing abuse in marriage and family and things, right? So it felt very interesting, and I started talking to the community manager. So, like, I feel like one of the easiest ways is just figuring out projects that really have like those things that interest you or their values align to yours, right? And just plus one to what he said. Sometimes they don't have it figured out. There's one foundation I'm involved in at the moment. The design is horrible. I promise. I'm not even a designer, but I do great work compared to whoever was handling design. So, like, we're even looking for contributors at the moment, designers and things. So, like, just going into these projects, they don't even know they need these things. So, you need to now start shaping that culture and making them become more design conscious, right? So,
Thank you, Mary Blessing. Thank you so much.
So,
Please,
sorry,
can you put your hands together?
lastly, I want to understand the um, I want to understand the, um, the, 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 Who pays the bills for open source contributions? Like, very important question, because now you're contributing a lot, right? Like, who's paying for you obviously need a source of income. You understand? Is the end goal that perhaps the contributions will make you more attractive on the job market? Or do these contributions actually pay? Like, help us understand, you know?
Okay, thank you so much. I didn't touch base on that in our conversation, but I'm so more than happy to talk about it because open source has been taking care of me for. Okay, I'm being honest right now. Um, so yeah, who pay the bills? Most of these projects are funded. And I know most times why people avoid contributing. Most times people consider open source, oh, it's free. And if you don't have work, you don't have handwork, you know, do open source. It's for those that don't have handwork. But my dear, let me surprise you that, well, some of the highest paid people in tech are doing open source. That's the biggest shock because some of the money you get with from open source sometimes you might not even get it from, like, I'm being honest with you. And like I said, first thing is that some of these projects are being funded. Early this year, I worked on a project with GitHub, right? And I think even last year we had a project we worked on together, you know, involving Git scale project with GitHub, and all my time is up. And it's GitHub, it was paid. All right. I don't want to go into the figure, but it was paid. Early this year I worked on. I'm also working on a project currently with another, you know, staying open source sustainability lab. It's paid. So most times it's funded, but it doesn't mean that open source is not 100% free all the time, right? Some projects pay. And the other ways you also get benefits. Most times it's always about the network. People really undermine. I've built network. I've worked with, of course, senior executives in GitHub that I'll probably my random role will not even get me to. And these people speaks for you in room where you are not there, right? And these are, in fact, that's what you should look out for the most because social currency pays more, right? If I give you $10,000 right now, you probably burn it before February. But you get a connect that calls you after every 1 month, and then you're getting that is like, you get what I mean. So I think maybe I don't know if you can summarize the other question, so I just address it then.
So
probably
I think
just
I have the last question. Sorry, I have a question.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So talking about making contributions. So I'm not a designer,
yeah.
but I'm just imagining because if, for instance, changes are made frequently, do we think about the end users? Like, how do they feel when things just move around like that? Or is that not how it works?
Please, can you repeat?
Okay.
I think.
I believe if you're making changes,
Yeah.
that's what we're making that open source, right?
Yeah.
So I'm talking about the end users.
Yeah.
Because if I open my app today and see that, okay, this login button or make transfer has changed from one page to the other, I'm talking about the user experience when it comes to use the open source design. Does not come.
So that side is also a process, right? Oftentimes, of course, if it's in terms of so even in terms of coding now implementation, even when you make all those changes, you have to make a pull request that will now be reviewed and then merged, so it's not like it's just straight up make and it goes live. So as a maintainer, even if someone also works on a design, I have to just kind of like jump in, check what's up, is this cool, does it align with the brand style and all that, and then before we sort of like push that. Have questions, but if you have more questions, maybe you can see me in person. But I think this should be the last question, right? Do I still have extra time? I don't have.
Okay, this question prompted mine. So YouTube basically does that. So I'm wondering, how does that work generally? Because you may sleep yesterday night, your YouTube is fine, and you wake up, you just see that they've changed. I think recently they made some changes to the views, and so I'm like, there is no notification. So is it that they just do it, or they feel okay, they have the access, or maybe open source, or
you mean I'm not sure I really got.
I mean, based on what he said.
Yeah. Okay. Based on what he said.
So the changes, because that they don't require any notification. They don't notify anybody. Me, I don't get any notification that they are changing or they are updating or they say go to this thing store and update.
Are
It just
you
changes.
okay? That's a different conversation. But
No,
you want to say something? I'm coming. I want to. Please, can we just get? I think my time is over. Okay. Can you want to say something? Okay, you go ahead. Go ahead, please. Yeah, please let the software tester talk.
Sorry, as a software tester, some of our applications, there's always auto update, majorly on YouTube self. So sometimes you put auto update. So probably and they've done the changes, and your application is not auto update. So the next morning, definitely it's going to change itself. So they won't notify you. And it's not as if you're actually testing for them. Assuming I test for them, I will say, okay, probably there'll be something that's going to go on tomorrow or next tomorrow. But you that